find a person, a business, or a sport that hasn't been impacted by the coronavirus restrictions in Scotland over the last 18 months. I wanted to look at sport in Scotland and see how sport have really coped. Specifically, how boxing have coped, what they had to change, what they're doing now, and what they may do in the future. Boxing is first and foremost a combat sport. It's physical, it's aggressive, and you need to get pretty close to your opponent. It's full of excitement, the crowd is usually pumped, and the atmosphere pretty electric in most circumstances. However, over the last 18 months or so, and until very recently, the picture has been a lot more like this. Empty rings, no training, no competitions, some sort of makeshift work from home programme, and really, just silence. So, how did the boxing world in Scotland really cope during the pandemic? I wanted to find out how the pandemic impacted different people within the boxing world in Scotland. I wanted to see how they really felt, what they had to do, how things changed for them. Are there any positives at all that have come from the last 18 months? And where do they see boxing going now? I spoke to coaches, athletes, and those involved in Boxing Scotland to find out a little bit more. Boxing is pretty unique when you look at the split between amateur and professional, if you compare it to other sports. Take football, for example. From SPFL all the way to Scottish League 2, all clubs are classed as professional. Therefore, the clubs were given the green light under government guidance to return to training and matches back in March this year. While amateur boxers, even those at an extremely high level, training for World Championships, Commonwealth Games, continue to train at home alone. Boxing Scotland was established in the year 2000. The mission? To promote and develop boxing all over Scotland. Boxing Scotland worked with clubs up and down the country to increase the number of people of all ages and abilities participating in the sport. From youngsters just starting out to elite athletes working towards things like Commonwealth Game qualification. Boxing Scotland is making huge moves for Scotland in the boxing world. But how did the pandemic hit them? Boxing Scotland faced one of their toughest challenges so far over the last 18 months. I spoke to Marianne Crichton, Head of Sport Operations at Boxing Scotland. I wanted to find out how Boxing Scotland coped, what they had to change, what they did through the pandemic, and what are they doing now to get back on their feet.
It was difficult, it was hard, and it was hard to support people. Sport Scotland did a lot of kind of online kind of mental health kind of seminars, stuff like that we would share. The regional development officers would do like roadshows and stuff kind of every couple of months just to try and keep that engagement going. But yeah, it was difficult. It's been a difficult year. It's been a difficult year for everyone, as I said. But financially as well, there was literally no income. So the clubs were kind of hit that financial impact, but us as an organisation, that hit us significantly as well. So now it's just, as I say, there was that massive appetite back in, finishing the season really strongly in March 2020, and to have that kind of 18-month period of downtime. Now it's just kind of hit the ground running because everyone's just wanting to get back on board and they're wanting to get back into where they were. And it's, we've only just started the season the 1st of August, and we've got 41 clubs affiliated already and upwards of 550 boxers, and that's, if you think about the statistics, prior to that, probably the end of August we were looking maybe 30 clubs. We're only like 16 days into the new season, we're plus 40, so the appetite is just massive. The elite squad as best we could, and then again trying to support the wider community in terms of the clubs and the members that are out there. But I think things are looking up, they are looking good, the appetite's strong, and we're just trying to keep the ball rolling and hit the ground running with this new season.
Boxers are finally back in the ring. It has been a long time coming. Training's back, prep for competitions, and some of Boxing Scotland's boxers have their sights set on the Commonwealth Games. However, it's not just the elite squad that's been impacted. The development squad have been impacted too, and it's had an impact on bringing new talent into Boxing Scotland. I spoke to Ben Holm, Regional Development Officer at Boxing Scotland, to find out how he felt about the last 18 months. How do you think the pandemic and lockdown and everything has impacted Boxing Scotland generally?
Well, from my point of view, I work with the clubs. So my role is a regional development officer. So really working grassroots level with the clubs. And from my experience, it's had a huge impact upon them. I think boxing has probably been one of the most affected because of the nature of the sport. It's an indoor sport. It's close contact. So we were probably at the bottom of the list when it came to sports coming back from the pandemic. We saw a lot of outdoor sports. They were able to get back out first, and boxing have had to wait quite a while. So between the start of the pandemic and our pilot event coming back, it was 17 months. So 17 months with no boxing. It's an incredibly long time. We have had our clubs doing activity in the gym, but it's not the same as proper competition. And especially the fact that our clubs rely on club shows for their income so much. The finances are based around being able to put on a show and recoup money through that way. And I think boxing is different from a lot of other sports in that way as well. So it's been a really hard time for the clubs, and we've had to give a lot of support as an organisation to those clubs, helping with funding and just trying to help them survive, really.
Yeah. And you mentioned there it's kind of been 17 months, it's a long time. So what are you guys doing, what are Boxing Scotland doing to kind of try and play catch up, I suppose? Like, what are you guys doing now to make sure that you're back to that place pre-COVID?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because we're on the cusp right now of having our pilot event. So there's a lot of learning that we need to do as an organisation on how to manage how we do events now, because things have changed. You know, there's going to be masks and social distancing and all that. So it's going to be a learning curve for us, but we're certainly planning over the next 12 months to get the sport back. So we're already got dates for national championships, and they're going to be quite big championships with hundreds of entries. You know, hopefully with spectators as well. And also supporting the clubs to get those club shows back, because they are so vital for the clubs. So we're going to be supporting them. It'll be a learning curve for everyone, and we just have to try and support everyone and manage it the best way that we can. But we're certainly optimistic looking forward now. Fingers crossed that the worst is behind us.
I was lucky enough to be invited to attend the Return to Boxing event hosted by Boxing Scotland. The event took place on the 21st of August, around 18 months since the last. There was no ignoring that things had changed. One-way systems, social distancing and hand sanitising stations throughout. A polite reminder to all to keep high hygiene standards and wear masks. The only exception, the boxers during their bouts. Even the rings were wiped down after every single bout, to make sure the boxers were kept as safe as possible. Boxing was back, competition was back, some spectators were back. It felt a little bit normal. It was great to see the youngsters getting in the ring after all those months off. There were medals to be won, there were winners, there were losers. However, I think the biggest victory was that it all ran smoothly. It felt safe, and it just felt a little bit like the pre-COVID world. With the competition and competitive nature of some boxing, boxing is also a great way to keep fit. It's hugely popular in Scotland and has really blown up in the last few years. Lockdown and restrictions has stopped that from happening as well. People are just getting back to the gym and to classes that they love. A lot of those classes include boxing. I spoke to Paul Keane, boxing coach and gym owner in Dundee, to ask how the pros, how the amateurs and how the people who just want to keep fit have coped during lockdown.
Basically, we've got professional boxers, amateur boxers here. Been doing this for the last 20, 30 years. It's been a great journey, but it's now a case of, I think it's just exploded at the moment. We've got massive attendance in the amateurs, and I've now got 5 or 6 pros in the gym as well. This aspect of it as well at the moment has just booming. We do fitness boxing classes every day of the week, and the minimum we're getting is 30, 35 in the classes. It's good that over this period and that as well, it's been very hard with the thing about now that hopefully we'll see the kids getting back into it and that as well. We have lost a lot over the last year as well with the lockdown. A lot of my top fighters are now, they were at an age and they're just moved on to other things now basically, so it's because there wasn't constant training for them. We're not even allowed to fight yet at the moment, to be truthful with you, so it's the only ones that are allowed to fight is my pros. So, but we've had a few and it's been reasonable. I'm just now hoping that we can get things back to normal again, that's all.
After looking at the impact that coronavirus restrictions has had on boxing as a sport as a whole in Scotland, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. I wanted to see whether there's been any specific implications on women's boxing as a sport in the country, whether that be delayed events, upset to training, or any other issues that's been going on in the last 18 months of a world that's definitely not normal to anyone. I spoke to athletes and organisations to see how they found the last 18 months, how they found restrictions and having to alter training, and where the future of women's boxing in Scotland really lies. Firstly, I wanted to find out how the pandemic impacted women's sport in Scotland as a whole. I spoke to Maureen McGonigal, Chief Executive of Scottish Women in Sport, to get her take on the last 18 months, find out what Scottish women in sport are doing next, and ask whether she thinks there's still a gender gap in sport in Scotland.
Scottish Women in Sport are 7 years old, and we've been a self-funded organisation throughout that time, so basically the events that we put on, our conference, our awards dinner, help to keep the organisation running. So it's been a pretty tough struggle through COVID. You know, it's very strange to try and sort of understand the impact that COVID's had on, you know, women in sport in Scotland. I think during it, when things were easing, they were second in line. You know, it was always a male sport first. But I think coming through, there's much more happening. And I think the fact that we've just had the Olympics, you know, which gives all sports, and you do see a spike in coverage, has helped. But I think we need to work hard to ensure we don't lose that momentum that we'd got just before COVID.
At the pilot event run by Boxing Scotland in August, it was great to see young girls getting involved. There were multiple female bouts and the ages ranged as well as the experience. After speaking to Maureen, however, I wanted to find out a little bit more. I wanted to speak to athletes and ask how they felt about being a female boxer in Scotland. I caught up with Megan Reid, world number 5. She's in the elite squad at Boxing Scotland.
It's been difficult towards the beginning, but then we got like a remote programme, so we're still be able to do stuff at home and obviously go out for runs, do as much as possible on Zoom, which everyone loves these days. Yeah, so like I said, it wasn't the best, but I think you just had to make the best out of a bad situation, like everyone. But yeah, with there being no competitions and whatnot, it's once we're starting to get back into it now, so it does feel like you're playing a bit of like catch up with your fitness and your performance and whatnot. The World Championships coming up in November. Hopefully they still go ahead, so that'll be my like immediate aim, and then going into the future it'll be the Commonwealth Games, which I need to get selected for. So that'll be what all my focus goes on. Just try to get selected for them.
Megan is a huge talent and a great success. However, she didn't actually take up boxing until she was 23. She's a member of the British Army and a full-time member of their boxing team. I simply wanted to find out, why boxing?
It was through the army, just as like a laugh basically. Well, not a laugh, kind of a bit of fitness and like just for something to do, get out of work. And then I done it, I enjoyed it, I was half good at it. And then I just went on from there and just worked my way up. It was just the fitness. I didn't really, obviously when you first start, you just think you're just hitting each other in the face for the fun of it, like hurting someone. But then once you actually get into it, there's more skill involved, like techniques and whatnot. So yeah, once I started learning more about the skill and the techniques, then I started to enjoy it more.
I wanted to find out how Megan felt about male and female boxing. Is there still a gap?
I think females, in my opinion, I think females are up there with the men now. I mean, you've got like professionals, you've got like Katie Taylor, and then like amateurs. I mean, Lauren Price just won a gold medal for the GB in the Olympics. So I think females match the men now for how much like media attention they get and whatnot.
I was still curious, so I spoke to Hannah Rankin, Scottish professional boxer. Hannah held the IBO female super welterweight title in 2019, and as of October 2020, she's ranked 5th best active female middleweight.
So I was just thinking about this the other day, and actually I think for women's boxing, the pandemic, ironically, has actually been quite a good thing for us. It meant that we had a sort of a captive audience stuck at home where they couldn't go out and they couldn't go and watch any live boxing. So the only boxing available was when Eddie Hearn was obviously putting his fight camps on in his back garden on Matchroom. And he chose to showcase some top level female fights on all of those cards. So all of the fights that were on there were like top level, so all people fighting for titles or world title level sort of thing. And I was lucky enough to be on one of the shows in Wembley when he was also doing that one as well. So it meant that our sort of captive audience, as their first introduction to women's boxing, was actually top level female fights, and there was no excuse not to watch it because you were stuck at home. What else were you going to do? Whereas when I was earlier on in my career, I often hear guys go, "Oh, it's the chicks fight, let's go to the bar." So they didn't really have a choice to do that for this one round. And actually, I think there's been a real positive response to it, and people are quite excited to watch women's boxing now. And I think a lot of like young women, like young girls, mums, aunties, like they're all seeing these women out there fighting, and actually they're getting quite involved in the sport. And a lot of us are becoming sort of household names now, and you would never have dreamt of that actually happening 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, I think it's had actually a relatively positive outcome for us. For myself, during COVID times, I was very lucky. I managed to maintain my training with my coach, and when the opportunity did come up on one of the fight camps, one of the fight shows with Matchroom, to fight Savannah Marshall, I was available, I was fit, and I was ready to go. So unlike a few other fighters who didn't get opportunities to fight during the pandemic, I actually was able to take the opportunity when it came up. I also had an opportunity to go to South Africa as well, which was a very exciting experience too. So yeah, I think I've been very blessed and quite lucky. But yeah, no, I can only see the COVID situation as having had a positive impact for women's boxing.
Yeah. You kind of touched on kind of earlier in your career and things there, but I was just curious, what was your route into boxing? Like, what path have you taken to get to the success that you're experiencing now?
So actually, I started off doing taekwondo when I was a lot younger, maybe like, 9, 10, 11. And then I actually stopped it when I was in my secondary school, and I was actually focusing on a classical music career. That's my other career that I do alongside my boxing career. So I actually hadn't done any combat sports for a long time. And I finished my undergraduate at the Conservatoire in Glasgow. And I wanted to get fit again before I went to London to do a master's, because I thought I've been a bit lazy, probably ought to do some exercise. I actually really like combat sports. I think I'm drawn to the discipline of it and the structure. It's kind of like music. You have to practice to get better at it. There's lots of skill involved. So yeah, I got back into doing Thai boxing at the Grip House in Glasgow. And then when I moved to London, I met my coach now, Noel Callan, and former heavyweight champion, Sweet D Williams. And we all kind of got together, and I fell in love with boxing at that point there. So I was just doing it for fitness, and that was probably my early 20s. Just doing it for fitness. And then I did some for white collar boxing to raise some money for charity. I unfortunately lost my mum right when I moved to London, and boxing was there for me in a really difficult time. And I think that's probably why I kind of put so much into it and got super focused at it, because it just helped me deal a lot with the grief, and also gave me a different sort of thing to focus on other than music. And so I was doing white collar fights to raise money for charity. And then I wanted to go to the next step. So I decided to go professional, and I was working with professional fighters for sparring and things. And I got my license, and here I am now, sort of coming up for 16 fights later.
Yeah, honestly, I'm so sorry to hear about your mum, but also that's kind of an inspiring story to see that you kind of nearly got comfort from the sport. Everyone kind of talks about how good sport and participation, whether it be just at a fitness level or a professional level, how important that is for mental health and things. So I mean, that's just a key example of that, how sport is something that can help get you through the most difficult times in your life.
Absolutely. I think sport is so important, especially at like a grassroots level for like young kids, because a lot of kids I'll see coming to the gym, like the gym is really their home. That's their family, you know. And I even feel that now, even at the level I'm at, when I go into the gym, I feel like I'm with my family and my friends, and that's people that I spend so much time with. They're there for me at my most difficult times when I'm starting to cut weight and I'm grumpy and I'm horrible, you know, and I'm working towards my next fight. And those are the people that see all of the rough stuff that not everybody else sees before you get in the ring on fight night. So yeah, I think boxing definitely provides people with a family. It might not necessarily have the same sort of structure at home.
Also, just going back to what you touched on in your first kind of answer about how COVID has allowed kind of females to become household names. Obviously, that's something that unfortunately a lot of female fighters aren't used to, and it's something that's progressive and needs a bit more work. I don't know if you would agree with that, but just in general terms, do you think that there is still a gap between female fighters and male fighters, and what do you think the next steps should be, or what can be done, or do you think we're on a good path now? What are your opinions on that?
Well, I really think since we've had the pandemic and Eddie Hearn decided to go out on a limb, like he took a leap of faith, really, so he should be applauded massively, with the decision to put female fights on his cards. And actually that's given people a real insight into women's boxing, and I think it's really started the ball rolling. So we're actually on a very positive trajectory right now. I've started recently working with a streaming service called Fight Zone, and with Dennis Hobson Promotions, and my next fight's actually going to be on that website. It's going to be streamed live for people to watch all around the world, and they have a whole roster of female fighters who are now getting that platform. And this is a huge step forward, because normally you wouldn't get a chance to be seen on air or on TV, online or anything, until you kind of had gone quite far in your career and maybe went on to a Matchroom card or a Frank Warren card or something like that, which who have BT Sport and DAZN now. It used to be Sky Sports, but Fight Zone is now providing a TV platform for these fighters who are at the small hall show level, and for some other bigger names as well. And that's actually a huge step, you know, and for women to be seen in like their first, second, third, fourth fight, it's a big step forward. And so that's just something that's come out of the pandemic, and I think it can only be a positive thing, to be perfectly honest.
Hannah's initial interest in boxing, and Megan's, was through fitness. They saw it as an opportunity to exercise, keep fit and have fun, and look at them now. I was curious to ask Paul whether there's a lot of females that attend his classes in the gym, and if there's any potential to go from fitness classes to amateur to pro.
We've got about 4 or 5 ladies. One of them is going to be to turn professional soon as well. In the club, she's been with me a lot of years, so she's going to be to turn professional. She was world kickboxing champion. She's moving on to pro boxing, so she's coming through. But I think since the Olympics, when they first introduced the ladies boxing, it's just amazing now. Katie Taylor's just been so fantastic for the sport, for all the ladies, and I just think that they're now emulating some of the men, to be truthful with you. And it's Katie's brought the sport on so much as well. I'd say it's 60%, 70% ladies that are coming in the gym rather than men that love the boxing aspect, hitting the bags and getting some aggression. But it's also one of the best sort of fitness that you can do over all sports. It's not all over body fitness we do. We train, it's basically, the way we train the fitness classes is they train the same as the amateurs and the pros, but they're not taking the hits. That's basically what it is. So we're just constantly trying to change things. Even the pros, we've got strength and conditioning coaches in now. It's not like the old school where it was one coach did everything. We've got a whole team of people doing it, dietitians, strength and conditioning coaches. We've even got mind coaches and that on board and that as well, with all the fighters and that as well, to help them through it as well.
Katie Taylor, as well as Megan and Hannah, are all great examples of how successful women's boxing really is. Paul gave me a great insight to the split between male and females attending his gym and getting involved in boxing in different levels. But I wanted to know what Boxing Scotland were doing to try and get younger girls involved in boxing. How were their programmes interrupted by the pandemic? What are they doing now, and have they got future plans to keep girls involved?
In terms of kind of female fighters or younger girls getting involved in boxing, what do Boxing Scotland do, or what have you guys done in the past to try and get more female involvement in the sport?
Yeah, so we'd actually very luckily been the recipient of a grant from Sport Scotland that was around female participation in sport. So there was a fund called the Women and Girls Fund, and we were happily able to get just over £13,000 to run a project. It was all about getting women and girls more active. So from our point of view, it was about getting them, firstly, trying to get them in schools. So we ran a project with 10 different clubs across Scotland, where each club went into a number of different schools in their local area, and they put on female-only classes in schools. We'd previously done school classes, but they'd been very male-dominated. And one of the feedback that we had got was that there were some girls who would have liked to have gone, but they maybe felt self-conscious going with other boys, or they maybe thought, the boys might be rough or whatever the thinking was. So this was the first time we'd ever done female only. And we got a fantastic response. We had over 1,200 participants take part from those 10 clubs, the classes that they put on. Unfortunately, the pandemic did halt the project, so those numbers would have been even higher if we'd been able to run and continue the project. As it stands, we kind of paused it, so we still hope to go back and deliver the sessions that we'd said that we would. But I think from that project, it really showed that there's a huge appetite for female boxing, and we maybe just have to go about it in a way to reach them at a place where they're comfortable. It certainly shows that if we do that, they're more than happy to come and try the sport. We had a terrific story actually with a young girl in Inverness called Sari Grant. So she took part through Highland Boxing Academy. So she was at her school, and basically the coach had stopped her in the corridor and said, "Do you want to come along to this class for a way to put on boxing?" She hadn't been planning to do that, and she went along. And essentially 9 months later, she joined the club and had been entered into the Scottish Championships and had actually won the Scottish title. So she went from never putting on a pair of gloves to being Scottish champion. So that was a fantastic story, a fantastic success story of that project. But at all levels, whether they're going to be that level or just want to be involved in the sport from a fitness point of view, I think there's a lot of benefits for boxing for people, and we want to encourage everyone, whoever they are, to give the sport a try.
Training's back on, competitions scheduled, and the gyms are full again. Let's hope this sense of normality continues. Boxing Scotland's return to boxing event was a great success. It got the boxers back in the ring after a long time off, and it was safe. Young boys and young girls took to the ring. It was great to see. It truly showed that boxing is for everyone. Whatever age, gender, or whatever level you may be at, just give it a go. We hope that everyone can get back on track, from athletes like Megan and Hannah to young people who are wanting to get involved in boxing for the first time. Fingers crossed, scenes like this are a thing of the past, and the silence is no more.